Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Rotoworld Week 4 Waiver Wired Q&A with myself, Patrick Daugherty, and our waivers guru, Mr. Kyle Dvorchak. He's going to answer all 942 of your questions about Jauan Jennings, the new number one overall receiver in the entire NFL. Of course, joining the number one overall tight end in the NFL from Week 1, Isaiah Likely. And we'll get to Kyle to the bottom if Jauan Jennings is different. We'll get to the bottom of whether, this is a different situation than Isaiah Likely from Week 1. And let's just start off right from the top. Who is your top ad of the week? Is it Jauan Jennings? If so, why? If it's not, why? Who are we looking to get on our teams for Week 4?
I will go with Jauan Jennings. I think he has the most immediate impact of any fantasy option you can add right now. This is a really good week for short-term ads because I think Cam Akers is certainly viable in this spot. And it's a lot of guys who you don't want to blow the fab on because you're getting one or two what I think will be really good weeks. Jennings looks like the real deal in this 49ers offense until more talented players return. So I'll say it's Jennings, though I do think this week more than others depends on what you need.
Everyone looks like the real deal in the 49ers offense until Kyle Shanahan turns on them, though. And he's now turned on my guy, Brandon Ayuk, who, despite paying him hundreds of millions of dollars a few weeks ago, apparently now no longer features in this offense. Kyle, I'm not bitter at all. No, please, for the love of God, Kyle Shanahan.
I need some Ayuk too.
We need Ayuk so bad. Elsewhere this week, man, it's not a whole lot of names on this waiver wire. You prefer Sam Darnold, I'm assuming, to Andy Dalton. It looks like that way in your column. Am I correct in that assumption?
Yeah, but Dalton's not a bad pickup. I mean, everything we said about this Dave Canales offense, the receivers getting open, adding more receiving talent, spending like literal hundreds of millions. It's not all spent yet, but committing, potentially like hundreds of millions of dollars to the offensive line, an aggressive passing stance. All of these things came true the moment they got a real quarterback in the system. But I don't want to run too far with that where we have a 3-game sample of Sam Darnold being truly elite. And I think as far as like physical talent goes, it's clear that he has the edge in that category as well. As far as number one receiver talent goes, he has the edge in that category as well. So I do think Andy Dalton is a good budget. I can only spend a few fab dollars guy. But do I think you're starting him every week going forward? I don't think that's probably true. I think he's a good start going forward. But Sam Darnold looks like the real deal. I think you actually just are starting him every week going forward. And the only thing holding him back is the fact that Brian Flores is freaking shutting down opponents right now. If they were getting into shootouts, which we haven't seen yet, he would be like the QB2 overall. But instead, I think he's like 7 or 8 because he has the best touchdown metrics, but just not the best volume metrics.
A few quick thoughts. Geno Smith still under 50% roster in Yahoo. He is available this week to face the Detroit Lions. Hopefully that's a shootout.
I'm going to add him. There are so many players who I'm like, oh, well, clearly everyone's just added this player up to, like Cam Akers, like, oh, he's got to be 48, 49, 50%. No one went out and added him. My favorite one from last week was Brenton Strange, who you can still add tonight, by the way. My favorite one was Brenton Strange. Is like, he's got to move from 0 to at least 5%. Stayed at like 2. So I'm going to add that one. Good call.
Justin Fields is still under 50%. My 2 words of caution on both Darnold and Andy Dalton is that Darnold, so one, I've been kind of falling into the pattern of thinking like, man, well, imagine Sam Darnold if he actually attempts 35 or 40 passes a game, where that could be a careful what you wish for with Sam Darnold. Maybe not. Maybe he's just fully breaking out. He's in the perfect spot at the perfect time. Maybe one of the functions of his success is that he's not being asked to do too much. He's getting 25 to 30 attempts a game, and they're all in pretty advantageous situations. So we'll just see how Sam Darnold does. Kind of more open it up game script, which is probably coming for week 4 in Green Bay against the Packers and returning Jordan Love. I think this will be a really, really telling game for Sam Darnold. If he rocks this assignment in week 4, then I think we're starting to talk about Sam Darnold maybe being a top 12 option, in a year where no one, not even Patrick Mahomes, is producing like consistent high-end results. And Andy Dalton, it was amazing. 319 yards, three touchdowns. Just don't be surprised if this is sort of an Isaiah Likely moment, I feel like, where this is by far the upper end of his normal range of outcomes. But, I mean, it's one game with a real quarterback. And Dave Canales sets Deontay Johnson's career high for yards and Chuba Hubbard's career high for yards from scrimmage. So one data point, but an extremely compelling data point. So Dalton and Darnold, 2 guys we're obviously monitoring going forward.
I wish I would have known that Chuba stat. I know he came really close to his receiving yards total, so I included that in my article. Technically, Xavier Legette also got his career high in receiving yards. Had 0 last week, and last week being 2 weeks ago, and comes back with, I think, 40 or 45. Actually, it was 42, if I remember correctly. This is like you said, we can't count on 300 plus and 3, but it really does feel like they've found not only a just functional offense, but an offense that is putting its quarterback in a really advantageous spot. Albeit, the physical talent or even the mental talent of Andy Dalton is nothing to write home about. But I actually think this is by all the metrics, the nerd metrics, this is an incredible offensive line. And they immediately flipped to pass heavy after having a negative 10% pass rate over expected with Bryce Young. And that was maybe to be expected. 1, because you're trying to hide Bryce Young, but 2, Canales talked all offseason about, we got to establish, we got to get the ground game going. And then his quarterback was like, no, I can complete a 12-yard pass. And he's like, oh my God, this is incredible.
This is the most amazing thing he has ever seen in his entire life. Yeah, Deontay Johnson's 81st game in the NFL, Chuba Hubbard's 52nd, and it took Dave Canales 1 game with a real quarterback to spark those career highs. So we are optimistic. We, of course, just as usual, don't want to get out over our skis. Chad wants to know, did we get out over our skis in week 3 when we proclaimed Brock Bowers easily a safe top 5 tight end, maybe even the new tight end 1 overall? We got expectations once. He immediately cratered along with Devontae Adams. For whatever reason, Jacoby Myers and Trey Tucker led the Raiders offense in week 3 against the Panthers, who used to be a doormat until they made 1 personnel change. Now the unstoppable Carolina Panthers. We know it's so hard to stay even and not get too high, not get too low in fantasy. Did we get too high with Brock Bowers last week, and are we going to get too low this week after 1 bad game?
I think we'll get too low potentially. I honestly don't feel like we got that high. I feel like having Trey Tucker see 9 targets and Jacoby Myers I think they both saw 9 on the dot, if I remember correctly. That is an anomaly. We've talked about things we don't think will continue. That feels like a pretty good one. And the alternative is, we were claiming that it's either him or Trey McBride. Well, let's Google Trey McBride. What happened there? And he's concussed and didn't have a good game. Sam Laporta, and he's in with an ankle sprain. Mark Andrews, and he played 4 freaking snaps of football in week 3. Maybe we should lower expectations for Brock Bowers, even though I still think he leads all tight ends in targets. Maybe we should lower them. But somehow, once again, in week 3, the entire position got lowered because we got at least banged up, if not straight up lost for a week or 2, multiple potential stars.
Let's abolish tight end. I think it's coming down to we've abolished kicker. Some leagues working on abolished defense, abolish tight end. Of course, soon abolish quarterback.
Please.
Even running back. I know running backs trying to make running backs having its dead cat bounce right now. Running backs actually coming back. And then it won't. We'll be down the perfect game, receiver only, in a few weeks. Let's see here. Got some questions. We got a long trade question here. We'll throw Kevin a bone. He had the very first question. 14-man PPR league. Lamar, Alvin Kamara, Jordan Mason. Kyle, can you make sense of this trade here? He's a long one.
He's got a bunch of good wide receivers on his team, and Alvin Kamara and Jordan Mason. You kind of hit the nuts on that one. And he's thinking of trading Jaden Daniels and Najee. Who'd you target to upgrade at RB2? Honestly, the thing is, for now, you don't need to because you have Jordan Mason. I talked about this last week. I still feel like, maybe I would say especially Joe Mixon. I feel like it's clear to me that Dameon Pierce and Daria Gunbowale and Cam Akers are just duct
Say
tape.
British Brooks's name.
Is he a fullback? I'm fairly confident he's a fullback.
He probably is. I have no idea. He's
is.
Very British, very one touch on Sunday against the Vikings. Sorry.
Yeah, I think all of these guys are just duct tape and Elmer's glue holding together a backfield until the guy who they gave 30 carries to in week 1 comes back. And I'm not particularly deterred by what we saw in week 3. They rightfully got stomped by the Vikings. Vikings also shut down the 49ers. They also, for what it's worth, they beat the Giants more badly than another good defense. The Browns beat the Giants. They're just a legitimately really good defense. Do we think CJ Stroud isn't as good as we thought before from one game? No, I still want to target this offense. And especially in your spot specifically, if you're holding on to a Charbonnet, a Jordan Mason, you've got the next few weeks covered. And then especially for someone like Charbonnet, you've got maybe 1 or 2 more weeks covered, and you're looking to try and get that next spot starter, or you could just go out and get Mixon, whose owner right now might be kind of fiending for someone just to start this week.
The Vikings, the first defense in a while, I forget how long it was, where each of the first 3 games they had 5 sacks and multiple turnovers forced. So
nice.
Looking like an absolute juggernaut of a defense. Joseph Garcia wants to know about a player you wrote about in your waiver wired column, Jalen Tolbert. Is he going to supplant Brandon Cooks? So Jalen Tolbert, fantasy managers have been trying to make him a thing for several years. The Cowboys have kind of been trying to make him a thing for several years. Is he finally becoming a thing? Weird comeback game script each of the past 2 weeks for the Cowboys. So they're having to throw like a metric ton. But is this finally happening? Brandon Cooks not looking any less dusty than he did last year, Kyle.
Yeah, on the year, Tolbert's run over 80% of the routes. I think that was up to 89% last week. He wasn't dominating the targets. That's not what he's going to do, but he's going to run just as many roughly routes as Brandon Cooks. And right now he's averaging 1.2 yards per route run. Brandon Cooks down at 0.7. Like, that is bad for a running back, let alone a wide receiver. This isn't to say that Jalen Tolbert is particularly good, but he's already running all of the routes, and he's already clearly a better player at this point in his career than Brandon Cooks. Again, that says more about Cooks than it does him. But yeah, if I had to project who scores more fantasy points from week 4 to the end of the season on this roster, obviously it's between these two. It's Jalen Tolbert for me. I just don't think Brandon Cooks has really anything left in the tank unless he sun runs on touchdowns. He did that last year. He extended it into week 1. I don't think it can hold up.
I'm going to answer another one real quick from Joseph Garcia, who wants to know, will Ricky Pearsall have standalone fantasy value if these 49ers injuries persist, Kyle? And my answer on this is no. And then I think we're seeing what we always see with Kyle Shanahan is that he thinks it takes guys years to develop in this system. And even if you miss like a few weeks of training camp and have been a staple of his offense, like Brandon Ayuk, he's acting like it's a multi-month process to get you going again in the offense. And some of it's been matchup based. Some of it's been the kind of like there was, I know they faced some zone defenses, which Deebo Samuel dominates early in the season. But I think especially with Pearsall now, he missed a lot of camp with injury, even before his extremely unfortunate off the field incident. Now he's missed 4 games. Who knows how conditioned he is? And to me, this adds up to like a lost rookie year for Ricky Pearsall. Because Deebo's not on IR. He'll be back fairly soon. Kittle's not on IR. And I have a really, really difficult time envisioning Ricky Pearsall making a 12-team league impact this season. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I could see him popping up for some games at the end of the season, but I don't think we're anywhere close. Just to the points you said, he just didn't. It wasn't just like literal hospitalization from a gunshot. He also wasn't practicing much in training camp before that for various other injuries as well. If I remember correctly, it was a hamstring, and then he immediately re-aggravated it.
He did.
So very little time in an offense that his coach has shown he's pretty particular with who actually gets to get out there. If we had longer time horizons for someone like Deebo, someone like Kittle to not be returning, I would say, yeah, maybe in week 5 or 6, he actually does get up to 60% of the routes and is making splash plays. But my vibe is that we're getting Deebo back around that same time, or we're getting Kittle back around that same time. So I agree. I think the timeline lines up poorly for him to be running enough routes by the time the receivers are healthy to cement himself in a role. I still have some hope. I'm not going to say it's entirely a lost rookie season, but you shouldn't be holding on to it. It might be. It's been an awfully bad run out for him. So you should not be holding him in a 12-team league, and I wouldn't really even consider stashing him. There are probably better IR stashes.
There are. I promise we'll get to questions from other people than Chad and Joseph. But another one from Chad who's just wondering how bad things are looking for Quentin Johnston, Ladd McConkey, the Chargers rushing attack. We have second ankle aggravation now for Justin Herbert. That's a really, really important game for the Chargers this week against the Chiefs. This could be like the game that decides the division. We, of course, think the Chiefs are going to win the division anyway. But if the Chargers want to make a dark horse bid for the AFC West, they probably need to win on Sunday. So maybe they'll run Justin Herbert out there again. But 3 weeks now, even with healthy Herbert, really low passing volume, Kyle. What are we telling people about the Chargers pass catchers as Justin Herbert continues to battle a high ankle sprain?
Yeah, I think without Justin Herbert, I'm probably not playing in any of them. I would like to hold on to QJ and Ladd, though. They've kind of cemented themselves as a top duo. Josh Palmer's banged up, and he wasn't that great to begin with anyways. All the first read looks are going to these two. But if they're starting Taylor Heineke, I can't find it in my soul to play them in my flex. I still think even with backup tackles, I'm probably playing J.K. Dobbins. His production in terms of efficiency and overall fantasy points didn't show up last week, but he really started to push Gus Edwards to the fringes of the offense. If you're giving me all the carries in this run-first offense, even with backup tackles, his efficiency won't hold up, but he will have a really good shot at getting in the end zone or going for 100 yards because we know how this team wants to play football. And while the offensive line isn't healthy, the defense is still, I think, one of the best in the league. Seemingly overnight. Like we talked about this in Slack. Get a coach who cares. He doesn't have to be the smartest guy in the room. Get a coach who like cares to coach his players.
Well, just get a coach who actually coaches football fundamentals. Like Harbaugh emphasizes basically like fundamentals over scheme. Not that he doesn't have a scheme. He has a very run heavy scheme, but he's clearly like coaching football instead of like coaching. I don't want to say coaching football other than coaching the scheme where he's like, whatever. We're going to play a style of defense and style of offense. The style doesn't really matter, though, if we're not fundamentally sound, if we're not confident. So I
think he's just genuinely a really good leader of men. Like we see this with like Mike Tomlin gets so much more out of these decrepit rosters every single year because outside of a diva receiver or two every year, and they're never on the roster next year, by the way, outside of a diva receiver, you never see his teams give up. You never see them give less than 100%. And they always seem to like understand the fundamentals and not make mistakes. And I do think there are coaches who just do that better. I mean, there are definitively coaches who do that better. Two of them just happen to have the same last name.
Derek is worried about Devin Achane. You and me both, Derek. Would we trade Achane and Kyler Murray for Jahmyr Gibbs? So we'll get to the trade question in a second. But first, how worried are we about Devin Achane with Skylar Thompson, who clearly ain't it under center? Tim Boyle also ain't it. Tyler Snoop Huntley maybe could be it if he gets a desperation start. How worried are we about Achane after only one really bad game without Tua Tagovailoa is out at least 3 more weeks?
I'm worried. It doesn't seem good. We need the thing is, I am praying for Tyler Huntley to save me.
Which is real bad.
It's bleak. It's bleak when that's your prayer, is that's what you hope will save you. I do think he is a better quarterback than Tim Boyle and Skyler, but I don't know by how much, and I don't know how effective that can be when you join the team 3 weeks into the season. You don't get any off season with them. I think Achane's going to see a lot of work, and I think his efficiency will improve, especially between the tackles. Like he hasn't been an efficient runner yet this year, but it's kind of the nature of his game is he's not efficient until he goes for 90 yards on one carry. And then you're like, oh, all the numbers look great now.
Kind of like J.K. Dobbins. I wanted to mention that earlier. Yes, J.K. Dobbins is like a boom or bust receiver where some weeks he's going to get the long run. Some weeks he's not. I think more weeks than not, he'll get the long run. Sort of a similar situation with Devin Achane.
Yeah, I expect him to hit the booms more often, but it is that same thing where like, oh, the numbers don't look good until they do, because that's just the nature of his game. Whereas David Montgomery, I think from start to finish is going to be like pretty consistent. He'll always kind of get there, but never really have the explosive game in terms of just long runs. Of course, he can do it with touchdowns. Achane's not going to be like that, but it is a lot easier to stifle his efficiency when you're like, we can devote like one corner to all of their wide receivers, and that should basically cover Skylar Thompson's passing output. So, I mean, I'm worried. I think the answer for me is I'm worried. I think I'm taking this deal, especially since you have CJ Stroud. And I've been a Gibbs bear. I'm saying, why isn't he getting more work? Is anyone concerned that you have the number 2 running back on a team and you're drafting him at the 12th pick? I do not feel great about any of my Miami players going forward.
But along those lines, Phil B says, "It's Tim Boyle season." Said no one. Very much.
Tim Boyle isn't even saying that.
No, he's not. Real quick on the Dolphins, then. How concerned are we about Tyreek Hill, who actually was schemed work the first Skylar Thompson go around in 2022?
Yeah,
everything seems so much bleaker for some reason on Sunday against the Seahawks. It is the Titans in Week 4. Are we dropping Tyreek Hill out of the top 12? I'm assuming you're going to say yes. I'm a little less sure. Are we dropping Tyreek Hill out of the top 12 at wide receiver?
I'll say no, but are we dropping him outside the top 6? Definitely we're dropping him outside the top 8. I think so.
I agree. He's on the 1-2 borderline now.
His numbers, like you said, his numbers were still good. It's been some time, but his numbers were still fringe wide receiver 1 worthy. It was like 16 or 15 PPR points per game in a mix of Skylar Thompson. I think a few Teddy Bridgewater starts as well. A few years ago, the offense has changed in some ways, although it's fundamentally the same offense. So I think he can sustain being in your starting lineup as a top 2 receiver in your fantasy lineup production, but I don't think he can sustain it was worth taking him at the 103 or 104, and it's not his fault, but it's, let's roll the dice.
DM Sports, another guy. Panic is always the theme, but it's understandable because we're getting data trends now, not just data points. We're actually getting trends. One trend is Mark Andrews not producing. Didn't even have a catch in Dallas yesterday. 3 really quiet games to start the season. DM Sports wants to know how high is the panic meter on Mr. Mark Andrews.
I think I said earlier in the show he played 4 snaps. It was 4 routes. He ran 4 routes, which was tied for a career low. And the other games are like literally he just left early with injuries. He was not the highest drafted rookie on his own team and still never ran fewer than 4 routes. Like never even got close to 4 routes. I mean, they're just not treating him like he is a superstar player. And he's also not producing when he's on the field like a superstar. He is, I think, well past his prime in that aspect. And then they're treating him as if he's just a role player. That 1-2 punch is like, I probably wouldn't rank him as a tight end 1 next week, but the alternative is, I don't think is entirely Isaiah Likely because they're giving like Charlie Collar snaps and maybe they're getting, they got a touchdown from Rashad Bateman. And this is a team that has always thrown touchdowns to the most obscure players like Nelson Aguilar's ended the year with 4 touchdowns. So
yes,
I don't think there is a correct answer outside of Zay Flowers, but to start him. I don't think there's a correct answer at tight end on this roster. I don't think the answer though is Mark Andrews.
Real quick, off the top of your head, week 4, I don't even know the matchups. I think the Bears have a good matchup. I think it's the Rams. Cole Kmet against the Rams for Mark Andrews. I can't remember.
I hate that. That sucks. I think it's Cole Kmet.
Yeah, everyone crawling back to Cole Kmet. Huh? Turns out he was good after all. I was the only one.
I don't know if he was good, but Gerald Everett definitely is not good. We know that.
Again, we're getting the questions from everybody, but Joseph, he's been really bringing the heat. He wants to know, will Roschon Johnson supplant the RB1 spot over Taylor Swift, DeAndre Swift? Roschon Johnson, it was a healthy scratch in week 1. He was active in week 2, but then didn't play. Then a Travis Homer finger injury magically makes Roschon Johnson the RB2 in week 3, but he was easily more productive than DeAndre Swift, who's averaging 1.83 yards per carry and just looking like categorically not it. Yeah. How real is this situation getting for DeAndre Swift? Is he going to lose? Let's just say, how much work is he going to lose to Roschon Johnson, we think?
He's going to lose he's going to lose work to a combination of Roschon and Khalil Herbert, or if they choose to make Travis Homer active, maybe it's him, maybe it's Velus Jones, who got run at running back. I mean, he fully transitioned essentially to running back during the preseason. He's going to lose work to someone because you just cannot sustain being this bad for this long. This is the exact same thing we saw with Miles Sanders last year. And I remember thinking in the preseason, this feels Miles Sanders-y, but Miles Sanders got one of the worst outcomes possible. He ended up going to a really bad team with an offensive line that needed work, and he was less efficient than even I, as someone who didn't really believe in his talent, projected. There's no way Swift gets that exact, and it's the exact same run out instantly, the same exact run out, like a similar contract. But that's what's happening. And Miles Sanders proved that no matter how much money your team has sunken into you, at some point your poor play will be punished with less touches. And nothing Swift has shown us says the efficiency will turn around. The volume will come back to that at some point, in that guys who average 1 point something yards per carry don't continue to get the bulk of the work for that long.
Running back's a position way more than maybe any of the other 21 positions, save for quarterback, where you're just too exposed. If you're not producing, you could coast maybe for 3 or 4 weeks, even at middle linebacker, maybe you missed a few tackles or whatever. You cannot coast at running. It's so clear when you're struggling, and it's definitely not all his fault. The defenses are just teeing off on Caleb Williams. They're not blocking well. But I totally agree on Swift. The panic time is definitely already started with DeAndre Swift, where he's just too visibly failing, where no one can deny what they're seeing with their own eyes. With DeAndre, so it's kind of what we feared too. We didn't fear 1.83 yards per carry, but we feared not great outcomes, and we are getting the worst outcome. Osborne wants to know about the Colts' brutal schedule the rest of the season. It doesn't matter that much with a guy like Anthony Richardson. What matters much more for Anthony Richardson is Anthony Richardson, and he hasn't completed more than 50% of his passes in any of his 3 starts. Kyle's. He hasn't completed more than 17 raw passes in any game. Only 7 completions. So he had 3 completions at 25 plus yards yesterday. We like that. Then he had only 7 other completions. He's not running very much. How concerned are we with Anthony Richardson? Where it seemed like we weren't going to be concerned after week 1.
Yeah, I think it's the rushing that really has me concerned, because the thesis for me was not that he would be a great passer, it'd be a high ceiling passer. And we saw that play out in week 1. And we've got 2 bad outcomes since then. I don't think that's really surprising to me in the slightest. Like, he was in college an extremely poor, he was a good decision maker, but he was extremely poor accuracy thrower, basically on anything other than the deepest throws. And that has value and you can improve on that. But then in his rookie season, in a limited sample, he was the same player roughly. And he is the same player again this year. That's like Blake Bortles and Drew Lock essentially are that guy too. And the reason Drew Lock never found success and Blake Bortles eventually flamed out was in part because they don't have a second super special talent to rely on. Anthony Richardson's was supposed to be his rushing production, but we just haven't seen that in terms of, he doesn't scramble almost at all. Like, he's not a scrambler, which to his credit
had some good stats on that. He's scrambling at the same rate as like Aaron Rodgers, which is,
yeah, he's really good. And this is, I think, more from a real life perspective at hanging in the pocket, not taking a ton of sacks despite not scrambling and trying to throw it to someone. But the moment it leaves his hands is when the play breaks down. And then on the other hand, from a fantasy perspective, if you're not scrambling, but you're not completing passes when you're pressured, it doesn't really leave us with a lot to work with. And they're not scheming him a ton of rush attempts. Like that can't save him at this point. I do think the more he struggles, the more it makes sense for the team to try and dial up the run. That's kind of what we saw with Jalen Hurts in his rookie season. It wasn't particularly accurate in his rookie season. The team said, well, like, you've got a special trait to rely on. We're going to try and get you involved on the ground. But at this point, we kind of have to see it first. So I'm still ranking him inside the QB1 ranks, but that's because QB1 is so ugly every single week. And I wouldn't blame you if you ranked him outside of it. I get it.
Well, let's see who you're actually starting him over real quick.
Oh, you're holding my feet to the fire here.
In week 4, are we starting Anthony Richardson against the Pittsburgh Steelers or Sam Darnold in Green Bay, Wisconsin?
Oh, it's Darnold, I think.
Are we starting Anthony Richardson or Geno Smith against the Detroit Lions?
Well, that's going to be a high-scoring game. It's Geno.
I know. Anthony Richardson or Derek Carr in Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, Georgia?
I think I'm still Ant there.
All right. Well, Ant, so then you might still treat him as a QB1. Last one, Ant against the Steelers or Justin Fields against the Colts?
And I wrote about Fields. I think Fields is like completely transitioned his fantasy scoring style from you're either getting 4.8 points or 39 to you're never getting more than 20, but he's a good bet for 14 because they're just not running enough plays and passing enough because so much of his rushing production comes from scrambles. Unlike Ant, he's kind of the anti-Ant in that sense that you're not getting the explosive plays anymore, either through the air or on the ground. So I still think he has just enough rushing production to be like the QB 14, 15, but I don't think he has nearly as much of that spike week potential, which is fine, but you should know what you're getting into when you pick him up.
That's, by the way, with Anthony Richardson, I think with one of the immediate adjustments, it's going to just have to be more designed runs. I think they're seeing the same thing we're seeing. And like his special traits are not shining right now. We got to dial up more design runs for Anthony Richardson. Jerry Medina wants to know our thoughts on Darnold rest of the season. We already talked about that, so we'll skip Sam Darnold. Thoughts on Aaron Rodgers rest of season, who, listen, we're never going to get like truly vintage Aaron Rodgers again, but we came disturbingly close in week 2. What are our thoughts on Aaron Rodgers rest of season? The Jets in week 4, I believe, have a kind of tough matchup. The Denver Broncos. What are our thoughts on Mr. Aaron Rodgers after a really impressive game?
Yeah, I think he looks, I don't want to say, probably looks better right now than he did in 2022, which was
which is weird,
day, right? Yeah.
He's now turned 40 and blown out his Achilles in the interim and somehow looks better than he did in 2022.
Yeah, he kind of seemed over it then. And I mean, it didn't help that I think in that year, I assume his top receivers were Allen Lazard and MVS, where this year
Christian Watson was there, but
oh, true. He played 3 games full, but never,
Rodgers was quiet quitting in 2022.
He was also just like openly criticizing his receivers. He's like, yeah, you can't be making that. Like, you're a rookie. You can't be making that play or whatever. You have to be making that play. So I genuinely think he is more bought into his team right now than he was that year. Also playing better, also has far better receiving talent. But the thing is, we're not getting rushing production from him, and they're playing slow and they're playing balanced. I don't think he's a QB1, but I actually do think he is the classic better real life quarterback than fantasy quarterback.
Which he's always kind of been. He was elite in fantasy for a while. He was kind of like Russell Wilson, though, his prime, where when he was elite, it was because of efficiency and not raw volume. And the volume's just declining even more. The efficiency's declined off his peak too. So it looks like he could be a really good real life quarterback. But yeah, fantasy, most weeks he's not going to be in the top 12. Super Shaq wants to know, is he worrying about Travis Kelce struggling? We're talking about Mark Andrews. Travis Kelce every week seems like he's like, dude, I'm catching 4 balls for 30 yards and then leave me alone. All right, man. Are we worried about this?
Yeah, he's not even close to this team's number 1 receiver anymore. Rashee Rice has just completely snatched that mantle from him. Do I think it will be that way in every game from here until the Super Bowl, which they'll be in, obviously? No, especially in the playoffs. Like, this is going to be a great playoff best ball, playoff fantasy format buy low, where Travis Kelce just flips the switch and is really good again in week 19. Well, maybe they'll have a bye, but in the week 19, 20 and Super Bowls 21 or whatever. But until then, it's clear that I don't think they want him as involved in the regular season. And he's also not as good. Like, he's not 2020 Travis Kelce. He's not 2019 Travis Kelce. So his efficiency is falling off. The team's need to use him like a true number 1 receiver has completely dissipated. Rashee Rice can just fill that role as not just number 1, but like extremely efficient, high volume number 1. All of that to me says, as this person says, should I trade Kelce? If you can get even close to like the name brand value of Kelce, he's not giving you that.
Yeah, Travis Kelce is probably worth someone. I don't know if it's selling high or selling low at this point, but
can we get Roma Dunze? Do you think
selling on the name? I don't know if you can do that, to be honest. With this, how downtrodden tight end is, I almost think you have to just sunk cost this one and like, listen, man, 4 for 30 is not working, but like 6 for 47 would work. Like, can you get me 6 for 47, Travis Kelce?
Can he?
Because the Chiefs, as much as Rashee Rice's breakout is maybe hurting Travis Kelce, there's still a dearth of places to send high-quality targets. They need more than they're getting from Travis Kelce, where I'm just tempted to ride that out instead of selling low. And this is a classic adjust expectations downward, which we did even in draft season. We didn't draft him as like the clear-cut tight end 1 overall anymore. But, yeah, I don't know. It's a little rough. This is going to be a really, really interesting one. I'm going to answer this one real quick from Jay. Do we think Josh Jacobs' reduced carries continues or just a one-off? I think it was a one-off for week 3. Kind of a crazy situation there where the Titans weren't really competing that well. I think they're going to need Josh Jacobs a lot against Brian Flores and the Vikings' elite defense this weekend. And we have no idea like what the mobility is going to be for Jordan Love coming off his knee injury. So I think we're going to see a kind of an immediate Josh Jacobs bounce back. Kyle, do you agree with that assessment or no?
Yeah, I mean, we got 32 or 33 carries 2 weeks ago. I don't think we'll see that again for the rest of this season. Not that you were expecting that. I will say, Emmanuel Wilson, like every time he gets on the field, passes the eye test. And LaFleur all offseason talked about, we love a committee. They'd be like, hey, man, what'd you have for breakfast? He said, I had a freaking committee for breakfast. I love it. And then it was right after they had drafted someone who profiled as the true lightning of a committee, but not a true bell cow in Marshawn Lloyd. I think maybe they have found their committee mate in Emmanuel Wilson. Do I think he sort of forces the issue to even 1B levels? No, but I don't think we're getting the Kyren Williams workload from Josh Jacobs. Kyren just does not leave the field. I don't think we're getting that from Jacobs.
Unfrozen Ted Williams is talking about. So first off, I call him Tyler Beatty. This guy went to Mizzou for years. He was known in the state of Missouri as Tyler Beatty. That's what he never corrected anyone. He went by Tyler Beatty in Columbia, Missouri. He apparently now is going by Tyler Bidet. This is not a joke. The guy who had 9 carries for 70 yards for the Denver Broncos on Sunday against the Bucs. Maybe it was a practical joke. He was playing on the Fox booth, but like the Fox booth went to great lengths. Like, he says it's Tyler Bidet. It was Tyler Beatty at Mizzou. I'm going to say Tyler Bidet since apparently that's how he wants to pronounce his name. It was closeout mode in a game the Broncos desperately wanted to win, Kyle. But Tyler Bidet got the work. He was instantly more effective than Javonte Williams has been all year. It was 1 quarter, but it would have been the best quarter of Javonte Williams this season. How real do we think this is that maybe Sean Payton, who's kind of been in like an accountability mode, like we're fixing this, we're changing things. Do we think maybe he's serious about shaking things up in the backfield with someone like Tyler Bidet?
I don't know. I feel like Sean Payton's been more in the we're all looking for the guy who did this mode because
but then it was him, but he found him and he did. It was eerily similar to the 70-28 circling the wagons that the Broncos had last year, where Sean Payton's like, you know what? We're not going to suck anymore. We might not be good, but we're not going to suck anymore. And they didn't suck the rest of the year. And then now he's like week 3 2, he's like, all right, we're circling the wagons again. Come out and like instantly just blow away the Bucs. How real do we think the developments are in the backfield though?
Yeah, I mean, we saw last year he ran a true 3-headed monster committee throughout the year, and it kind of made everyone disappointing, albeit P. Ryan was not getting enough work on the ground or at the goal line to be useful, but Javonte, who was getting that work, was not efficient enough to be particularly useful. I still do think we're headed for potentially a 3-headed monster. I don't know if Bidet, as you say, is going to ever amount to enough of the backfield to be relevant, but he could amount to enough to make everyone else useless.
And Blake Watson was a healthy scratch in week 3. Like he could get involved. Clearly, I think what the Bidet usage signals is that Sean Payton, he's kind of already through, like giving Javonte Williams like endless rope. Like maybe Javonte still comes out and starts in week 4. But if it's like 2 or 3 yards per carry again, like the leash is going to get shorter every week. I think maybe that was the true significance of what we saw in week 3. I mean, we could be wrong. He could just be benching Javonte Williams. I think basically this is just the sign that, all right, man, like it's time to produce. And if you don't produce, I'm going to move on a little quicker each given week. Jason wants to know, would we trade Devontae Adams for Ladd McConkey and Brandon Ayuk? Ladd McConkey, who's been very inconsistent. Brandon Ayuk, who's yet to have a single useful game. What were we telling Jason, Kyle?
I'll take the McConkey Ayuk side. I cannot. One, Ayuk saw a ton of work last week. I think his target share was over 30%. He led the team in first read targets, as in he was the one they were trying to scheme the ball to. They just happened to have Jerry Rice 2.0 playing alongside him, and no one knew it. Like we were in Slack, and I was like, Jawan Jennings' first touchdown. I played a lot of Ayuk. It's fine. But there's no way we get a second touchdown, I knew they were getting to the goal line, an immediate second touchdown.
There was darkness when this was happening.
Yeah. You can't say the words I said on air for they'll bleep them all out. I wouldn't say them anyways. I don't think I know for a fact we're not getting that level of Jawan Jennings usage or efficiency going forward, but we will get that Brandon Ayuk usage, that 30% target share, that leading the team in first read targets. Ayuk is a guy who, when the team gets him the ball, is generally among the most efficient players in the NFL. We can scale that back because we know this isn't the best version of the offense, but I'm projecting to be the number 1 receiver of an efficient passing attack. I'm still high on him despite getting burned pretty badly last week.
Speaking of Mizzou greats, Mr. Kobe Brown, there's no idea if this is the real Kobe Brown or not. Kobe, sure. Thank you for your contributions to the basketball team. I was a humongous fan. What our running back could you maybe get if you're flipping a dual threat quarterback like Anthony Richardson or Jaden Daniels? Could you get an RB2, Kyle? Let's just start there. I mean, rules are different in home leagues, friends leagues, office leagues compared to like sharp leagues where you might have a much harder time getting actual value for a quarterback. What do you think you can get for one of these dual threat quarterbacks?
Yeah, I like Brian Robinson. I think the general consensus is that he's not fun and not interesting.
He's not. He's not.
He's good. He's good at football.
He's good. Man. He's getting more efficient every season in each game.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep. Every season, every game, he just looks to really be getting his rhythm down as far as being a running back goes. And I think Austin Eckler, while has maybe more juice than I expected, I think the reason he has as much juice as he has is because he's used in a very specific and very limited way that really does not have the ability to expand. And since we're talking about one of these two quarterbacks playing tonight, I think the other one, I can throw in Brian Robinson, who plays tonight as well. I just think he's good at football and seeing said football a lot.
Elijah Cole wants to know, should he sell low on Tyreek Hill for Jamar Chase? Jamar Chase would probably be a pretty great outcome if you're trading Tyreek Hill, to be honest. Or should you kind of weather the storm 3 more weeks, trust that Mike McDaniel, after a really unimpressive game plan in week 3, just in week 4, gets more creative about getting the ball to Tyreek Hill? Are we already in the situation yet where we're trading? Like if someone offers us a legit asset, are we unloading Tyreek Hill?
Yeah, I think you are. I mean, but this is legit as in Tyreek Hill's ADP was roughly 103. I think in home leagues, the running back started to jump him more. It's probably close to that 104, 105. And Jamar Chase was 2 to 3 picks later, maybe 4, depending on your time of draft and the site you were drafting on. If you told me you can have the guy who has Joe Burrow throwing to him versus Skylar Thompson, and it just cost you moving back 3 picks in the draft.
Yeah.
You would say instantly you have to take that move. I know obviously the outcome for the Joe Burrow side has not been great so far, but say whatever you want about Joe Burrow, whether you think he's good or not, or whether you think this start is real. He's better than Skylar Thompson by an insane degree. And I think Hill is better than Chase, but I don't know if he's better enough to overcome that massive quarterback gap, even for just a few weeks.
Did you know that Joe Burrow is older than Sam Darnold, by the way?
I saw that tweet and it blew my mind, but I mean,
I checked it immediately. It is true.
But it makes you remember that's former Buckeye Joe Burrow. Go Bucks, brother.
That's true. Former Urban Meyer Buckeye Joe Burrow.
Wow, that's actually nuts to me too. Really?
The journey into the past there with Mr. Joe Burrow. So yeah, Joe Burrow, not young. Let's see here. I'm hunting for some questions. Chad wants to know about down ballot Carolina Panthers receivers. Adam Thielen injured, hamstring injury. So it's really unfortunate timing for Adam Thielen. As soon as they actually get a real offense, he gets hurt. Are we interested now in like the ancillary pieces? Jonathan Mingo, Xavier Legette at receiver.
I am honestly interested in Legette because I don't know for sure if he's good or not. I do not think Jonathan Mingo is very good. And he didn't like completely dust Legette right away. Like he splitting snaps with him. We saw that in the preseason. We saw it carry into the regular season. But Legette's already coming in and taking work off of his plate. And I think looks better slightly than Mingo, especially looks better than Mingo did last year. It's just you really have to get a lot right. Mingo has to run a full share of routes if you're going to add him off the waiver wire. He has to run a full share of routes. He has to be a massively better player than he was last year. And the offense has to continue, maybe not at this pace, but at a high pace. I don't want to be going through all of those hoops for a guy like Jonathan Mingo.
And let's just say Dave Canales has revived a lot of careers, a lot of fortunes. There's all kind of established brands, basically. He hasn't really taken someone like Jonathan Mingo and like, so he hasn't had like a Quentin Johnston moment yet. Like Jim Harbaugh might be making Quentin Johnston relevant after everyone thought he was just a bust. Dave Canales has been a miracle worker, but it's been kind of with guys that we thought are talented. And he's like reviving fortunes, basically, more than almost making careers. But it's a different situation in Carolina. He probably is going to make someone's career. We just don't entirely know who yet. I agree with you. There's just better bets to place than someone like Xavier Legette. Steve-O, hello, Steve-O, wants to know, should he drop, I believe, Christian Watson for either Cortland Sutton, finally popped up, 7 catches, 68 yards on Sunday, or DeAndre Hopkins, who finally popped up, but at the expense of at the expense of Calvin Ridley. Christian Watson, we've endured a very slow start, Kyle, but now Jordan Love should be back for week 4. What are we doing with Christian Watson?
I would not drop him for Cortland Sutton. I probably would for DeAndre Hopkins. To me, the biggest thing is I think Jaden Reed is just extremely legit. He does seem like, I don't want to say a superstar, right? But when he's out there and they actually have a legitimate NFL offense, he seems like he can be a team's number 1 receiver. He just makes plays at such a high clip that Watson briefly held as a rookie, but hasn't quite replicated since. Reed is doing enough of that I think he's the guy who I'm projecting to lead this team in fantasy points going forward. And Watson then not only has to compete with him in terms of targets and efficiency, but I don't know if he's going to run the full share of routes because they do not take Romeo Doubs off the field. And that leaves them, like, does Dontavian Wicks play 0 snaps? Probably not. He probably plays more than 0. Those come at the expense of Watson often enough that I don't want to be taking Watson over someone like DeAndre Hopkins, who I still think is pretty good. Sutton, he's fine, but he's a fine, would not be a number 1 receiver on most other teams, on a team's passing attack that, albeit improved last week, their improvement didn't make them a superstar team. They didn't get the Andy Dalton level turnaround. They were just better than the absolute atrocity they were in the first 2 weeks. Their number 1 receiver, I'm not dying to get. So if you want to keep Watson over him for the upside, right? Because Watson still could be really good. It's early in his career. We don't know exactly what he is. If you want to keep Watson over Sutton, go for it. I would take Hopkins over him, though.
I would definitely keep Watson over Sutton, by the way. What is the ceiling with Cortland Sutton at this point?
Yeah,
you're hoping for touchdowns. Wide receiver is not a good position to chase touchdowns. If you're going to chase touchdowns, you do that at running back.
Totally.
You do not do that at wide receiver. I believe this is what's called trolling from JM. But he wants to know more points rest of season, Skylar Thompson or Deshaun Watson, Kyle.
If
don't answer seriously, but yeah, I mean, Deshaun Watson, man, like, listen, I'm having everyone be like, the offensive line, which is extremely banged up. But boy, Deshaun Watson really likes to take sacks behind the what's the word I'm looking for? Like patched together offensive line and
Patchwork.
Yeah, patchwork. He's making the line look a lot worse than the line's probably bad. He's making it look even worse than it actually is. I think it's like a failure of imagination. I tweeted Monday, like, I don't know, man, I think the benching might actually be coming. People like cannot accept this idea that he might get benched because of the salary, understandably so. But I think a huge problem for Deshaun Watson is they've actually seen the other side. Like they saw like literal dust, Joe Flacco come in and immediately run the offense better. I think the Deshaun Watson benching honestly is coming, and maybe a few more weeks if it continues at this rate. Because how could it not? Like you're basically consigning yourself to your season being over, and like if we don't see like major instant turnaround, regardless of Jedrick Wills and Jack Conklin's health, I don't know how you don't make the move. It's just been stunning the level of play from Deshaun Watson.
No, you summarized my thoughts perfectly. And I think the point to drive home is that we know this offense can work. Joe freaking Flacco showed us that. And I think Jameis Winston's probably better. Like he is just physically more there than Joe Flacco, who came off the literal couch. We've seen it work to a very high degree under someone who you wouldn't think had any shot at making it work. And the guy who consistently doesn't make it work continues to make starts. I totally agree. You summarized it well. I don't think Watson finishes the year as the starter.
We've got time for a few more questions. Get them in if you've been waiting. Elijah, by the way, is trying to find the Tyreek Hill line. I'm going to give you some names here, Kyle. We said we would trade Tyreek Hill for Jamar Chase. Would you trade Tyreek Hill for Brandon Ayuk? How about that?
No.
For Rashee Rice.
I would take Rice over him.
Tyreek Hill, I'm assuming you'd say yes in an instant for Nico Collins.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, Nico over him. I mean, I thought about it for a second, but yes, Nico over him.
Tyreek Hill for Malik Neighbors.
This is the one I thought about. This is the exact one I thought about. Hayden Winks had a tweet where he's like, who would you draft as the top 4 players in redraft if you had to do it from today? And I left out Malik Neighbors, and someone's like, have you thought about Malik Neighbors? Like, I was a coward for not saying it. I don't think I would, because we're talking so much about how bad the quarterback play is for Tyreek Hill. It's better for Malik Neighbors, but it's bad. Like, let's not get it twisted. This is still a bad quarterback situation. Hills is just untenable, but it's only untenable for hopefully 3 weeks, for a minimum of 3 more weeks. I don't think I would, but like that could make me look stupid. Oh, the NFL's target leader. I think he's the target leader right now. Maybe it's target share. And you didn't take him over Tyreek Hill. Maybe I'll look stupid. Yeah, that one could bite me. I totally could see how that would bite me. I still think I would take Hill over him, but that's the line. You said you were looking for the line. That's it.
Time for just a few more questions. Center wants to know who is the wide receiver one the rest of the way. And my addendum to this, Kyle, is why is it Justin Jefferson?
It's definitely Justin Jefferson. Like, he's just the best receiver in the NFL by a wide margin, and his quarterback is playing extremely good football. The only thing holding Jefferson from 3 200-yard games is that his opponents can't score points. It's a good defense. Maybe his opponents will continue to not score points, but at the rate where they've held 2 teams to 7 and 6 points, they're not going to do that, I don't think, right? So just give us one shootout.
Seriously.
And
this game's gonna be so telling against the Packers this weekend. Like,
please,
if they actually have to open the offense up, and then what actually happens when they open the offense up? Does Sam Darnold just start taking a bunch of sacks? Because one fly in the ointment is that as good as things have gone the past few weeks for the Vikings, Sam Darnold has taken 7 sacks over the past 2 weeks, which you wouldn't really expect when you're playing from a head game script. You know, it's not really when you're taking 7 combined sacks. So that is something to watch for with Mr. Sam Darnold. Van Pelt Collimer wants to know which tight ends are we grabbing off waivers if you were injured. He played Foster Moreau last week. He paid the price. A few guys under 50% roster: Cole Kmet, Mike Gesicki. We don't know what he's doing on Monday night. Noah Fant, Tyler Conklin. What were the names in your article too, Kyle?
You named them all except for Cade Otton was the other one. It's to me the number one. You're right. It's Cole Kmet. They just gave up on the Gerald Everett thing.
They should have. Gerald Everett, man. It was every time I targeted him, even this year, something bad happened. It's just
no. You were right that it was. We all agreed it was a dumb idea. We just had to convince you they were going to do this dumb thing. Yeah. To your credit, though, they gave up on it pretty quickly. Hopefully, I was going to say hopefully you didn't cut him in redraft, but I think most people did because he's under 50% rostered in Yahoo League. So if the person in your league cut him, he's the clear pickup. He's just getting all the routes with the rookie quarterback who put his best game on film last week, specifically like the second half as well. I think the other options are not fun, no ceiling, but you get literally every route on relatively good passing attacks in Cade Otton and in Tyler Conklin. The ceiling isn't there, but no one has ceiling anymore, so that's fine.
But Tyler Conklin, by the way, who I did cut like everywhere. And of course, they finally started friggin' throwing to him because it was so obvious they needed him. It made no sense they were not throwing to him. We're almost done here. This might be the last one from Joe, who's probably what a lot of people are thinking. What are we doing with Dallas Goedert after this week? The 10-catch, 170-yard eruption. Even if you take out a 61-yard catch, he was well over 100 yards. Didn't do anything in weeks 1 or 2 because he reestablished himself as like a top 8 tight end as the Eagles deal with all these receiver injuries. But, it's not long-term for Devontae Smith. Doesn't really seem long-term for A.J. Brown. Just how in the world do we handle Dallas Goedert after that eruption?
Yeah, if one of them misses this week, I do think he remains in the top 12. Again, you set a very low bar. Like, you score 9 points and you're the tight end 7. So it is a very low bar. But I will say, I do think just one of them misses and he's in the top 12. Both of them miss and you just run the numbers. Let me do my weekly projections. And where does he fall? He has one of the highest target shares. So I would say if both miss in just a short sample, but in 1 week, he's probably a top 6 tight end.
Our friend of the show, I think the show is done. Our friend of the show, Chad, has posted a message to me. He said, this is not a joke. I always wonder if people are joking, but he's not. Christian McCaffrey is going to Germany to have his Achilles examined, Kyle. This is pretty
examined. Is that what they're doing in a foreign country to his injury?
Yeah, Germany used to be where they'd go to get like the mysterious stem cell treatments that are banned in the United States. So he might be getting himself some stimmies. Over in Germany town. He's going to Baden. Just thought of the first random German town I could think of. But yeah, not a great sign for Mr. Christian McCaffrey. Probably a good sign. It's time to end the show, Kyle. Really, really good stuff from Kyle. Thank you so much for your expertise. Check out Kyle's waiver wired column. Check out his 32 stats column. Check out his start him, sit him column. Check out his podcast that he's on with myself and Denny on Thursday. Thank you so much for your questions. Really, really good stuff from our viewers and listeners each week. So for Kyle, I'm Pat. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back next Monday.